Ooh, excuse me. No, I'm sorry.
Good morning, Sarah. I just wanted to do a quick audio check. This is Matthew. You hear me all right?
We can hear you just fine. Thanks, Matthew.
Great. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, everybody. We will give folks another couple minutes and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Dad.
Hi, everybody. We'll give people one more minute and then we'll go ahead and jump in.
Okay, one more minute, so it's not waiting for Godot.
I don't like to get started before we hit our 100 mark, and we just hit our 100 mark, so we're getting close.
Wait, does that mean like we get an extra amount of pledge money?
Yeah, we're starting to charge for these events, right? I think.
Right. And if we get 100 callers, we get a match from. All right, I'll shut up now.
That's, peanut gallery. And I think let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the Pathways Initiative June stakeholder call. We're excited to provide you guys an update on what we've been doing over the last couple of months and provide some additional information about what we have ahead of us, because we have quite a few opportunities for stakeholder engagement, and some real input on some of the more technical issues that we are trying to unpack. Next slide, please. Just a quick review of the agenda. We're going to provide an update on step one. We'll walk through the workshops that we have planned on all of our workstream issues over the next couple of months, talk through our timeline. We'll provide a budget update on our fundraising to date and what we have ahead of us. And then we'll have an opportunity for public comment and talk a little bit about our next stakeholder meeting at the end of this agenda. So let's go ahead and jump in with our step one, sort of step one review. Next slide. As a reminder, step one is the first of sort of 3 steps we've identified with our stepwise process. And step 1 and 2 are within the scope of the launch committee, with step 3 being what we are trying to enable through our work on step 1 and step 2. Quick reminder of what step 1 entails. This was a proposal for elevating the authority of the EIM-EDAM governing body within the context of current existing California law, and addressing the independence over the energy markets, the EIM and EDAM. The launch committee developed this proposal over the course of last fall, refined it this spring with stakeholder input. We took a final vote at our May stakeholder meeting and presented it over to the CAISO. Next slide, please. The CAISO has now taken it into their process and is going through a stakeholder process that had a stakeholder call on June 18th. There's an open public comment opportunity right now. Comments are due on July 10th. It looks like we're going to have a second stakeholder meeting on July 23rd, and the CAISO board will be taking up the final recommendation with the EIM governing body sometime later this summer, early fall. And then we'll be working on the tariff language that will be required to actually make these changes, and that will go into effect once the trigger we established in step 1 has been met. As a reminder, that trigger is signed implementation agreements, essentially by those utilities who have committed to join EDAM thus far. So that includes PacifiCorp, who has already signed their implementation agreement, NV Energy, Portland General Electric, and then the California entities as well. So those are the utilities that will, once those implementation agreements are signed, will trigger step 1 to go into effect likely sometime early next year, so long as all of this moves forward as we are hoping and anticipating. Maybe anything you want to add to my quick overview? All right, perfect. And then with that, next slide, please. I'm going to pass it over to Evie Call and Spencer Gray to talk about our Step 2 workshops for the next few months.
Thanks, Kathleen. As we discussed during our last call with you, the launch committee took step 2 and we broke it down into manageable work streams. There's a lot to be done, as you know, with step 2. It's much more complicated than step 1. So we essentially started with 8 separate work streams that we need to get to by the end of the period here so that we can have a proposal to advance to stakeholders. The size of the work streams range from 3 people with the RO formation group to as many as 18 members. And that's the stakeholder process, which has the largest group of participants. One of those work streams, legal, isn't reflected on the list here, but it is really more of an overarching team that's going to connect the dots on the legal questions throughout the process. Another not on the list is an important one, and it's a California team that's going to be focused on developing legislation to accommodate whatever we come up with in step 2. But with I'll walk through the 6 groups that are on here and talk a little bit about what they are up to. So the stakeholder process, and Kathleen will talk about this a little bit later, but Pam Sporberg and Kathleen Stacks are leading this group. And they're going to look at questions like, how does the stakeholder process operate? Will it be a sector-based approach or some other approach? What is the import of a stakeholder direction and questions surrounding those issues? So I think we're going to have some important workshops on those, and those are going to be facilitated by GridWorks. The next group of issues is the CAISO issues, and this is really a big body of work that's including the next one as well, the existing tariff analysis group. And the leads on the CAISO issues are Spencer Gray, my co-chair on priority functions and scope, and I. And we're tackling things like, what is the nature of the authority that we're shifting from the CAISO to the RO? Is it governance or is it governance and operations? What are the elements of authority? Can and should an integrated tariff be maintained like we have today, or will a separation of the tariff be needed between the CAISO and the RO? We'll look at cost structure. What costs would end up being duplicated if we do a particular model? And what incremental costs are there that go with each of the models we're looking at? What would be the scope of the RO's financial and compliance responsibilities? Would existing contracts like the participating generator agreements and the scheduling coordinator agreements need to be assigned to the RO? How would we handle that? This is only a sample of really a very long list of issues that we're working on now. As I said, the related work stream is next, the existing tariff analysis, and Tony Braun and Scott Renzel are leading that group right now. And it's really an important work stream whose work's going to cross over into other streams. The objective really is to define the portions of the tariff that will fall within the RO's new scope of authority. And what it's requiring is this foundational analysis that the team has started looking at the existing CAISO tariff and looking at what sections are uniquely market functions, which are uniquely BA or transmission operator functions. And the most challenging question is, how do we handle those sections that may have elements of both or more than one function, more than just the market function, more than just the transmission operator? And with those dual purpose sections, which of them are really in the nature of generic provisions, which are a little bit easier to deal with, like creditworthiness, versus those that have really important market governance elements. So that work is well underway. They're working on a very strong work product, and we're looking forward to seeing what comes out of that. The next one is public interest issues. I think all of these are very important in their own way, and Carl Linville and Kathleen Stacks are leading this one. And this work stream is going to bring together many stakeholders and ideas around the question of public interest. We're going to be incorporating the work from the regulators who've been engaged in pathways from the beginning, who really initiated it, and the work of state consumer advocates. And there's a group who has been working with GridWorks over time to develop some thinking. And there'll be many other important voices in this public interest group. And as we'll see, we'll have a couple of workshops on that. It's going to be examining things like what are the public interest obligations that are going to be a part of the RO's responsibility. For example, a responsibility to minimize consumer costs and in undertaking market design to respect state and local authority. It's also going to be looking at the role for state regulators and consumer advocates in the process of designing the market and the tariff approval process. The next group is RO formation. Lisa, Vicky, and I are leading that work stream, and it's examining three very well confined issues. The first is, what is the most suitable organizational form for the RO to take? Should it be a profit or a nonprofit entity? And if it's a nonprofit, should it be a 501c3, C4, or C6? And we're looking at other examples across the country to get under this question. In what state should the entity incorporate? A particular Western state, which presents possibly some issues, or more neutrally in Delaware, where a lot of corporations choose to incorporate, given their strong body of corporate law. And then finally, what location makes the most sense as a principal place of business for this new entity? And what we'll be needing to look at is, what's the organization's scope? How does it operate? What's its relationship with the CAISO? And how do we envision the future of this organization? All of those factors will go into it. And the last work stream on this list is RO governance. And this is being led by Jim Shetler and Jan Smutney-Jones. And they're looking at things like, how many seats should the board have? How should those seats be allocated, and should they be allocated? How will the board be nominated and selected, and how will we fund the board? So you can see that there's a whole lot of work going on here to try to develop a step 2 proposal. And we're really pleased at the number of folks who have rolled up their sleeves to engage. It's really important, though, that the launch committee shares this work as we go more broadly with stakeholders to make sure we have public involvement. So as we mentioned in our last stakeholder call, we plan to do this through a series of public workshops. We currently have 3 planned, and we'll have the workshops and then include a comment period after each. And this slide really lays out the dates and time for those workshops and the scope. So the first one on July 25th are the RO formation and governance issues. And I think I've kind of gone through what the issues are that we'll be looking at in that workshop. We'll have a comment period open from July 25th through August 8th. On July 31st, we'll be having one on public interest. And the comment period will be July 31st through August 14th. And then August 5th, we have one that's kind of a all-day workshop, really. When you look at it, it's a long one. And that's because we're combining the CAISO issues and the tariff analysis work streams, which are closely related. So that's going to be a very intense day, and we'll look forward to your support and questions on that day to start getting closer on some of the questions we've raised there. So with that, I guess I will turn it back to Sarah or Kathleen on logistics.
Thanks, Abby. And thanks for walking through those. As you saw, there were just 3 on there. Some of those have combined the work stream topics, and we will be. Allie was just getting to that. I'm going to talk about the stakeholder process work stream here in a second, because it is a little bit different than the other work streams. This is we're going to have these workshops are going to be open to all stakeholders. They will all be virtual, and they will all be recorded, so you'll be able to refer back to them after the fact. Each of them has a 2-week comment period. And again, the stakeholder process work stream is going to be a little bit different. We'll talk about that in a second. And we're going to put up the entire, we're going to put up all of this information on the website so that you can see all the dates and Zoom links and all the materials and all of that, including this slide deck. Everything will be posted on the Weeb landing page. So Kate, I saw your note. I'm gonna keep going because we're gonna put this, all of this will be public and the slides will be posted on the website either later today or Monday. So next slide, and I'll talk through the stakeholder process work stream a little bit. So again, this is different in a couple of ways from our other work stream. First off, it is our largest work group, and so we have, and because it is so all-encompassing, and because it touches really so many different pieces of what we're doing, we wanted to take a little bit different approach and make sure that we have additional opportunities for input from all of you. We're also going to be taking a little bit longer with this particular work stream, continuing to refine our recommendations through the end of 2024. Another difference here is that we are being supported by GridWorks, and I'm going to give GridWorks an opportunity here in a minute to kind of talk through what their role and scope of work is going to entail, including some of the facilitation of the workshops. And then this is the one, this is a work group where we have some non-launch committee members who are participating by invitation, and we're working on sort of confirmation, but all of those, we will likely be releasing all of the participants of these work groups on our website as well. With that, I will pass it over to Matthew from GridWorks to kind of walk through what your role is going to be here in this process. Matthew.
Great, thanks, Kathleen. Matthew here, you hear me okay? Excellent. Well, good morning, everyone. Calling in from Grey Eagle, California, where it's 65 and sunny. I wish you all were here. I'm here running dad camp and working in between, so forgive me if some kids or dogs jump into the background momentarily. But it's my pleasure to join the call and to share a little bit more information about what GridWorks' contribution to the stakeholder engagement workstream will be. I'm joined this morning by a couple of members of the team who will also be contributing. They are Peter Cogswell and Neha Bazaj. I want to thank them and welcome them as well. We've had the pleasure of working with many of you over our 13 years, but in case GridWorks might be new to you, just a short introduction. We are a nonprofit organization focused on convening and facilitating stakeholders working on issues just like this in the West. It's what we do every day, all day, and it's a passion. Our team is a group of folks with expertise and background in the industry across the West. And each of us believes deeply in the power and contribution of facilitation. We're happy to be able to bring that to the good cause here at the Pathways Initiative and do so through this initiative that I'll describe in a bit more detail. Next slide, please. So as Evie set up and Kathleen set up, we're focused here on the policies and practices of stakeholder engagement that may be anticipated for the regional organization. And GridWorks is going to support the effort through 3 steps. They are first the preparation of a briefing document that will summarize and compare how comparable organizations and initiatives have conducted their stakeholder engagement. Second, by facilitating a series of workshops between July and September, and perhaps beyond as work and resources allow, to gather stakeholder input. And then finally, by summarizing the input we received from stakeholders who participated in those workshops for the benefit of the Pathways Initiative. We have received generous support from the Blank Family Foundation to support our time and expenses, and we want to acknowledge and thank them as well. Let me get into a little bit more detail here. So what you can expect from our briefing document, it will have essentially 2 pieces. One is introductory information, and the second is some comparative information. The introductory information will cover the questions listed here. What are different stakeholder process types? What are common elements in stakeholder engagement processes? What are common complaints in those processes? What does FERC require through Order 719? And what questions might stakeholders take up to further the goals of this initiative? That will be sort of the high level introductory information. But the meat of the brief will be here on the next slide. More comparative information, looking at different examples of stakeholder engagement from CAISO, FPP, RAP, MISO, PJM, NISO, and ISO New England. And we've doing our best and getting close to having those different initiatives organized around comparable criteria and factors to allow for easy comparison and insight for you all. Some of the criteria that we're using to organize those different processes are: how does the process deal with policy topic selection? Who selects among a list of competing priorities for stakeholder attention? Originating policy framing. Who first presents a problem statement and a solution range? Who might put forward a straw proposal? Third, in stakeholder-led workshops, who has responsibility for facilitating and moving that agenda forward? And then fourth, for voting, does stakeholder engagement include any kind of voting? If so, how frequently is that sort of sector-based voting scheduled? How is it performed? 5, what are sector definitions that have been used? How should sectors be established and defined and weighted for voting purposes? 6, standing and ad hoc committee status. What sort of forums or committees are used to organize sectors as they participate and organize themselves? And then lastly, selectivity of bottoms-up stakeholdering. How often and possibly through what kind of nomination process are topics subject to a bottoms-up sort of stakeholder-driven process? So this will be the heart of the briefing that we're preparing. And we expect that to be coming together here in the next, we hope 7 to 8 days. We would like to give you a chance to look through this before our first workshop. And we will share a little bit more information about the timing and content of that workshop here on the next slide. So what to expect from GridWorks workshop? We're anticipating 4 facilitated stakeholder workshops, all dealing with this core question of how best to structure the stakeholder process for providing input into the regional organization's consideration of market rules. Like all the other workshops, the meeting platform will be virtual. We'll use Zoom. We're expecting the duration to be 2 to 3 hours, adjusted as needed. And we very much hope that the workshops will be interactive, and we'll be structuring them toward that end. Expect less presentation and response and more discussion around key questions. We expect 4 workshops, and here's a high-level overview of the schedule and arc of those workshops. The first meeting will be an introduction to the briefing document that I just summarized, and some discussion of what's contained in there. And that will be scheduled for July 11th. Second meeting will be more discussion-based on how could issues and solutions before the regional organization get raised, and who is leader. This is sort of a process-focused conversation, and that will be scheduled for July 24th. Meeting 3 will focus on what could a sector-based committee and voting structure add to the process, and that will be August 2nd. And then we'll have a little break between meeting 3 and meeting 4, and that will include time for the launch committee to prepare a draft stakeholder engagement straw proposal for the group's full consideration. So meeting 4 will focus on reviewing their draft proposal. And then following meeting 4, that draft proposal will come together with the other work streams into the full step 2 proposal. And folks will have a chance to comment and engage with this slice of the pie in the context of the others. Next slide, please, Sarah. My last piece of information here is what to expect from our workshop summary. GridWorks will summarize insights gained through the workshop. Our role is to really summarize and represent your point of view in an organized way, not to editorialize on what should be done. I just want to make clear that we're not here to offer recommendations. We're here to help organize and first of all, solicit and organize your recommendations for the launch committee's consideration. You can count on our summary being completed shortly after the final workshop. in probably early September. And then that summary will be available as a standalone document, which will be publicly available, and you'll have it to be able to reference yourself as well. So the next slide is just wrapping up, and if there's time in the process here, I'm happy to take up any questions or have any discussion about this, but I'll follow Kathleen's lead in that.
Thanks, Matthew. I think we'll take questions during our public comment here shortly. I'd appreciate that. Before we jump into the timeline, I just wanted to provide just a couple more sort of logistical pieces about all of this work. As we have done to this point, our work groups are going to continue to not be fully open to the public, but recognizing how much work and input we really need to get done between now and September, we wanted to ensure that we had ample opportunity for stakeholder engagement, which is why we're having these workshops and public comment period. We are also, after this meeting, Sarah is going to send out calendar invites with all the Zoom information for all of the workshops to everyone on the distribution list. So you will receive them, accept or decline as you will, but the information will be available to everyone here. Again, it will be posted on the WEEP website as well. So just wanted to highlight those couple of things on sort of what our process is as we move forward. And with that, I'll pass it back to either Spencer or Evie to talk through the timeline for step 2.
Spencer Gray with NIPSI. I co-chair the overall functions and scope work group with Evan Call. I'm going to share the upcoming timeline for the launch committee to finish our work on a step 2 revised proposal. I'll start by mentioning that we wanted to build in both enough time to vet the issues that are identified throughout the April straw proposal as open issues in step 2. That really is the kind of master list of open issues that we're wrestling with through these different work streams. And then also make sure that we're finishing our work in time, counting backwards from when the California legislative session starts in 2025, so that the launch committee is handing over something that's actionable and sufficiently colored in to shape those discussions in California, which the launch committee itself is not set up to directly affect, but individual members of the launch committee are involved in legislative discussions in the state. So first of all, we've already covered here this morning the schedule of stakeholder workshops to inform the content of what the launch committee hopes to recommend for a final step 2 proposal this fall. So that will occur over the summer. We plan to take up the pen toward the end of the summer through September to draft a revised proposal, a revision to the straw proposal, again from April for step 2. Our plan at the moment, and I will note some of these dates are subject to getting adjusted and adapted as we need to, as we go through these workshops over the summer. But the current plan is by September 27th or on September 27th to issue a draft revised proposal, and then have a 4-week comment period for stakeholders and the public generally to comment, just as we did on the initial straw proposal in April. On October 4th, we'll have one of these workshops to present the revised proposal for step 2 to the public and to take stakeholder questions at that meeting. Comments would be due on October 25th. Our plan is to incorporate those comments over a few weeks into a final revision to the step 2 proposal for a final proposal, which we plan to issue on November 15th, and then have a final stakeholder meeting a week later to review any changes that we made to the proposal. That November 22nd meeting, just as we did a few weeks ago, to send the final step 1 proposal to the CAISO board and the EIM governing body for their consideration. That would include a vote of the launch committee itself. So that walks us through the process to get us to a final step 2 proposal. And then of course, we hope and anticipate some legislative discussions would follow the completion of that.
Thanks, Spencer.
And find yourself in center. Oh, there's the bag of.
And I think with that, I'll pass it over to either Jim Shetler or Lisa Hickey to walk through a budget update for the Pathways Initiative thus far.
Thank you, Kathleen. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, great. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jim Shetler. I'm the General Manager for the Balancing Authority in Northern California. And along with Lisa Hickey, I am the co-chair for the admin work group for the launch committee. Wanted to update the stakeholders on where we're at from a budget expenditure standpoint. And I will apologize. I know we use a lot of terms here in the initiative. We have options and we have steps and now we have phases, but we've kind of looked at breaking up the funding for this effort into 3 phases. Phase 1 is winding down with what we recently explained here on getting step 1 issued and an initial look at what a step 2 might look like. We were looking at a budget for that of around $500,000. We have been successful in getting commitments for over $520,000 for phase 1. We've collected over 460 of that. And we are currently estimating that we'll have a carryover of about $150,000 as we look at phase 2 and phase 3. Phase 2 from a budget standpoint is essentially now through the end of the year. And it's looking at the discussion we've just had about how we flesh out step 2 and make a final step 2 proposal. The costs associated with that represent a legal analysis support and project management support primarily, along with some other minor expenditures, including the support we get from Global Impact on managing the money. We are estimating about $450,000 required between now and the end of the year to fund that. We have initiated or are initiating outreach to stakeholders again about contributions. And I would like to thank those of you who have contributed to the Pathways Initiative. It is that funding that has helped us get as far as we have, and we'll need additional funding to get through now and the end of the year. And then phase 3 is looking at basically late 24 to January 1st to 25 through probably early 2026. And that's more of the implementation of step 2. So it's starting to flesh out the details around tariff language, bylaws language, how a nominating committee will be stood up, funding for a placement firm to help with selection of board members down the road. However, all of that will work in parallel with legislative efforts within the California legislature to get necessary legislation in place. So most of that implementation period will be prepping for once the vote and approval of legislation is in place to then allow implementation of step 2. We've estimated a little over $600,000 for that. I will note that we are seeking and plan on going in for additional requests to DOE for DOE funding for that phase 3 effort. And we're hoping we'll be able to get that to help defray those costs. In the meantime, again, we are seeking additional funding for phase 2. Would greatly appreciate those of you who would be willing to do so. And if you have any questions, the contact information is there for me, and I'll be happy to help with that. And then I'll take questions when we get into the question period. I'll turn it back to you, Kathleen.
Thanks, Jim. And with that, happy to take any questions, comments. Please just raise your hand and we'd be happy to hear from you.
Summer is just like winter is just people.
Lauren, will materials for future workshops be available in advance? It's challenging to have robust stakeholder discussions during these calls when stakeholders are receiving and reacting to updates on the launch committee's work in real time. Great question. It is one of the things that I made myself a note to say and then forgot to say. So the answer is yes, we should have materials, at least for most of these workshops, in advance for people to review and to chew on in advance of all of the workshops. So we will send those out on the distribution list so that that you receive them both in your inbox, and then they will be posted on the website as well. So yes, we are working diligently to get some actual documents and materials for people to review ahead of those workshops for more robust discussion. Any other questions, comments? Robert.
Thanks, Kathleen. I'm just a question about the budget. Does the $450,000 phase 2 budget reflect the $150,000 carryover, or is that the total that's still needed?
So the 450 is what we anticipate we need. Does not reflect the 150 that we would be deducting from that.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Bill. Bill, I think you might still be on mute. Bill, it looks like you're still muted. If you're having trouble with that, if you want to put your question in the chat, we're happy to take it that way too. Any other questions? Well, Bill, since seems like we're having some technical difficulties, if you are interested in following up, please shoot us a note. We're happy to answer any questions. And with that, I think we can go ahead and go to the next slide. So just to wrap things up, rather than having this meeting happening every month, with all of the stakeholder workshops that we're going to be doing over the next couple of months, we are going to have our next full stakeholder meeting on October 4th from 10 to 12 Pacific, 11 to 1 Mountain, noon to 2 Central. I just did some massive time zone work right there and on the fly. You should all be impressed. The hardest part. But in the meantime, we will be posting, as I said, all of the materials and meeting information on the Weeb website. We will also continue to provide the email sector updates. So look for those as we continue to move through the summer. And you can always reach us. There's contact information on that Weeb landing page, or reach out to your sector representative for any specific questions. And we are, again, happy to continue our discussions and provide as much information as possible. And with that, I think that's what we've got for today. Thank you all again for attending. We're looking forward to working with you over the next couple of months to continue to refine and develop the technical work for our Step 2 recommendation. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Happy 4th of July.
Thanks, Kathleen. Bye.
Happy Canada Day.
Happy Canada Day. That too.